Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Frank Santopadre, and we're here at the legendary Friars Club in New York City. Our guest this week is a writer, actress, producer, monologist. I knew I was gonna fuck up monologist.
You got it.
Yeah. I got scared. An internet radio host. She was a producer on The Green Room with Paul Provenza and hosts the Kelly Carlin Show on Sirius XM Radio. She's also the only child of arguably the greatest stand-up comedian in the history of the meeting. Should I do this whole shit over again?
Start again.
Yes.
Wow.
Sorry.
It's going to be long.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it was so amazing.
Did you have... You should have brought a change of clothes.
I actually have a change.
That's all good.
Take it in stages.
Yes. Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Frank Santopadre, and we're here at the famous Friars Club in New York City. Our guest this week is a writer, actress, producer, monologist, and internet radio host. She was a producer on The Green Room with Paul Provenza and hosts the Kelly Carlin Show on Sirius XM Radio. She's also the only child of arguably the greatest stand-up comedian in the history of the medium, the legendary George Carlin. Her one-woman show and her new book are entitled A Carlin Home Companion, Growing Up with George. Please welcome the only guest we've ever had with a master's degree in Jungian psychology, other than maybe Shecky Green. Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly Carlin.
I'm going to need to talk to Shecky about that Jungian stuff.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Much more intellectual than you would.
Wow,
guess.
I'm blown away right now.
Shecky.
Yeah, you always think of him as an alcoholic getting beaten up by the mob.
Yeah.
But
And driving his car into a fountain
yeah,
in Vegas.
that's what you think, but you're so wrong.
That's why he went into Jungian psychology.
Now, the last time I think we spoke was at the tribute. No, we were naming the street.
Yes,
They were
last
naming
year
the
they were
street.
naming the street.
Yes.
Yeah. Up on the Upper West Side.
Yeah.
My dad grew up on 121st between Broadway and Amsterdam. But the church wouldn't let us put the sign on that block because the church is there. So we had to go across the street, whatever.
So are you basically lying where he grew up? Or no?
No, not technically, because as my uncle, his brother, Patrick, said, yeah, we used to get high on all these corners. So
And a shout out to our pal Kevin Bartini, who
Yes.
worked so hard to make that happen.
I mean, really, it's all because of Kevin.
Yes.
It
Thank
would have
you,
not have
Kevin.
happened. Yes, thank you, Kevin. Love him.
And I remember I was on a plane one time, and I'm getting on the plane, and I see George Carlin sitting there a few seats down. And, I didn't want to bother him, so I just sat in my chair. And I see him get up from his chair and walk directly over to me, and my heart's pounding, thinking, oh, George Carlin wants to talk to me. And he says to me very quietly, yeah, I'm going to be working on some stuff. I have to read some things and write some stuff out, and then I'm going to take a nap, so I can't.
Gilbert.
So basically, your father told me to go fuck myself.
Oh my God, Gilbert, that is so my dad. This man had an obsession with controlling his time. And that's what he was doing. He
It's like a
had a
preemptive
plan.
strike.
He had a plan for the plane ride,
Right.
and he was like, "Oh shit! Now there's a comic on board.
He'll want to talk.
He'll
to me.
want to talk comedy or whatever." And now I just have to let him know that I can't do that because I'm slightly OCD. And oh my God, God bless Daddy.
Because I remember thinking, had he just stayed in his fucking seat and not come over, I wouldn't have
You
cared.
wouldn't have bothered him, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
But now I'm like hurt for the rest of the flight, and I'm sitting there feeling miserable
Totally.
for a 6-hour flight from L.A. to New York. I feel horrible.
Oh my
Did
God.
you tell me he gave you his info, though? His phone
yes.
number? That you carried it around in your wallet?
He did when it was getting near the end of the flight,
Yes.
when they announced they'd be making their descent. He got up and walked over to me and handed me a piece of paper with his phone number.
Yeah.
And said, "Next time you have something airing on television, I want you to call me and tell me, because I want to see what's going on in that mind of yours."
He loves you. He loved you.
Isn't that nice?
Absolutely.
Well-
And that was the sincere, generous part of my dad with comics. He did that with comics that he loved, and he loved connecting with them. And he wasn't a very social creature, as you could
Yes.
see. But he would have these moments where, and I do know that he was a big fan of yours. So, there.
And I feel horrible because there's a few people whose numbers I've gotten over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And like a few of them, one or two I called, and I was always disappointed when something happened,
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like when a girl gives a guy a number and she goes, call me. Here's my number and here's my cell number. And then you call and she goes, yeah. And I've had that with celebrities. So I feel horrible that I never called George Carlin, and Jonathan Winters gave me his number, and I never called him either.
Oh, Gilbert.
Wow, that's a
And-
bummer. And
yeah.
Norman Fell, right?
Norman Fell also.
Wow.
How did you not call Norman
Yeah,
Fell?
I
He's
wanted
a
to.
signature part of your act.
Yeah, I wanted to. But I had these other incidents where I called and I felt like, oh, God, maybe they just felt like you're supposed to give someone your number.
Well, that wasn't my dad, certainly not him, but I really wish you'd called Jonathan, because once Jonathan gets your phone number, I had the pleasure of finding this out. Was I saw someone from Santa Barbara's calling, didn't know who they were, pick up the phone, and Jonathan's in character doing the bit, and you have to jump in immediately and be a character with him and improvise for 10 to 20 minutes a bit. And the whole time you're thinking, oh my God, I'm fucking improvising with Jonathan Winters on the phone right now.
It's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Was it Paul? We had Paul Williams and Tracy Jackson on the show, and they were telling us that toward the end of his life, Jonathan Winters would just stand in the neighborhood,
Yes.
and just do bits for
Yes.
passersby.
Yeah, yeah.
Just draw them in.
Yeah, oh yeah. But that's what he
and
did.
then I had heard a story that Cheech Marin used to go to this one supermarket, and he would see Jonathan Winters going up and down the aisles, talking in different voices and being different characters.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then he would have to walk over to him and go, I think you should just buy something and go home.
Wow.
Bless his heart, as they say. Love Jonathan.
Go ahead, Gil.
And I remember, I guess the last time I saw your father was we were just talking about this, the Legends of Vegas, which
Yes.
they should have done for TV.
They must have been done it for TV, I'm thinking. Why else would they have done it?
Was it a fundraiser?
No, I don't think
No,
so.
it was like Larry King was
Yeah.
the MC, and your father, and Jerry Lewis, and Norm Crosby, Shecky Green,
Yes.
Jungian psychologist, and I think Phyllis Diller.
Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah.
and I remember too, when I saw your father there, he gave me a very friendly hello and kissed me on the cheek.
There you go.
Yeah.
See?
So I should have called him.
You should have.
Praise
Yeah.
from Caesar.
Yes.
You should have called him. And speaking of Bartini and the dedication of the street, there was a club, there was a show that followed that.
Yes.
And I believe the man sitting across from me, my co-host.
Okay. Can I just say,
Yes.
Gilbert, really, that night, I mean, it was wonderful. We were all up there, and everyone was getting up and do their stuff. And you got up there, and oh my God, I still love you. First of all, I don't think I had laughed that hard since my father died. And you got up there and, oh my God, it was so beautiful. Talked about all the reasons why you were happy he was dead. And I'm crying. I'm doubled over laughing so hard. And for about the first minute or so, the audience was not sure what to do. But once I think they saw me laughing as hard as I was, they relaxed a bit. My dad would have loved that bit. It was because it was perfectly you, and it was taking advantage of this earnest, could be sappy, earnest moment that you just love to stick a huge stick into. And you never stopped. You went on.
I wasn't there, but I heard about it.
And on and on and on. It got more and more ludicrous and insane.
Yeah, I kept talking about how I was praying that your father suffered toward the end.
Suffered horribly.
And was praying to God to kill him.
Pure genius.
And I remember both what touched me is both you and your Uncle Pat.
Yeah.
Both said the same thing, that George would have loved that.
Absolutely. And like thank you profoundly for doing the thing, for crossing the line.
Oh, and
for all of us, you know.
And that's it's funny that you mention that, because I've in interviews for the many times I've gotten in trouble.
And the many times you've crossed the line.
Yes.
What you're talking about?
Not me. I'm Red Skelton.
Oh, you're fine.
I always said, well, George Carlin said, well, can you want to say the line?
No, you say it.
Okay.
I'm like totally spacing.
Oh, yeah. It's the duty of the comedian to find out where the line is drawn and deliberately cross over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that you're gonna take people across the line with you, and they won't even know it has happened at some point. And as long as they're laughing, most of them will be like, "Oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be." You know, it's because you give them permission. And so crossing the line was everything to my dad. Absolutely. And you certainly hold that torch high.
That's a nice way of saying it.
I'm a nice person, Gilbert.
Yes.
I'm a nice person.
And I thought it was interesting, because of crossing the line, like your father was a big fan of the Marx Brothers.
Yeah, and the Ritz Brothers, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, huge fan of both. Yeah, the Ritz Brothers, too. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My dad had it was such a great education growing up with him, because he loved all kinds of comedy. He loved pure slapstick, goofy, silly shit, and the most subversive stuff, you could imagine. So, I mean, Otto and George, huge fan. He turned me on to Otto and George.
Oh, the best.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
The best.
So, I mean, it was a real. It was always fun when my dad would turn me on to a comic, because it was a certain angle of it that he couldn't do, or that they were doing mining so well that they were representing that whole part of comedy, so.
Because I remember Roger Ebert said his father used to take him to Marx Brothers movies. And he would give him like a wink and a smile at certain things they said, like, you see how they pushed it there? You see how they got away with something there?
Well, and they were like Shakespeare, because there's the higher level conversation they're having, and then there's the slapstick stuff for the groundlings.
Right.
Right. So that's what why they were so brilliant.
There's Groucho's comedy, which is very intellectual and very verbal, and Harpo's physical.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just so funny you mentioned Otto and George, which was an act, and for our listeners that don't know Otto and George, find it
Please.
immediately.
Please.
We lost Otto, I think, last year.
Yeah.
Which
But
was
George
terribly
is
sad.
in a
George is in a home.
I guess
for
technically we
puppets.
lost George too.
There was a story, I don't know if it's apocryphal at all, about somebody, you've heard this, about an audience member getting so angry that he attacked the dummy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But that was taking filth to an art form, much in the way that your dad could do.
Yeah.
Could just something like Mongolian clusterfuck, that wonderful list that he reads at the end of Carlin at Carnegie.
Yes.
Which is, again, I urge people to find it. It's just wonderful.
Now, can you say these 7 words that weren't allowed by the FCC that you judged did a famous bit?
Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits.
Yeah.
I love it. And if you're going back to Class Clown, tits shouldn't even be on the list.
Of course
Right.
not. And then he added fart, turd, and twat.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
But the end of Carlin at Carnegie, which you should go back and revisit, he pulls out this list.
Like a scroll.
A scroll.
A scroll.
And takes that idea, takes that tried and true bit, and just turns it on its ear and does what, another 200?
Yeah.
And that's so long that he's reading them during the credit roll.
During the credit roll. And then we ended up selling a poster with, I think, over 1,000 of them on the poster.
It's absolutely brilliant.
And he had that great line that really explains censorship on TV, where he said, you can prick your finger, but you can't finger your prick.
And it's poetry. I mean, he would do it in
Absolutely.
that poetic way. Yeah, absolutely. It says it all.
And you said in the book that when your father would ask his mother what a certain word meant.
Yes. She would make him go, my grandmother, Mary Beery Carlin, she would make him go and look it up in the dictionary. And my dad told this story many times. And so one day he went to look up a word, or no, she had, what the hell's the word? He looked up a word and he'd used it at breakfast. And, okay, hold on. I got to get the story now. I didn't know you were going to edit.
We'll do an edit.
Okay, wait. So the word was peruse. No, the word was, what the hell's the word?
Is it in here? Is it in Hendra's book?
It's in Hendra's book for sure. Wait, Grandma. Oh, cursory glance. Okay.
Cursory glance.
So my dad heard the word peruse and wanted to know what it meant. So my grandmother, Mary Beery Carlin, told him to go look it up in the dictionary, and he was very excited. And she would always ask him to, use it in a sentence or whatever. So he was very excited. And he comes down to breakfast, and he says, so, Mom, have you perused the newspaper this morning? And she says to him, why, no, I haven't given it a cursory glance. And so he had to go march back to the dictionary and look up the word cursory. That was his mother. That's the sharp mind she had. She could tell a story also, do all the characters and all of that. And that was a woman who very much fed him and fed his obsession with language.
And your father almost wasn't born. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is very true.
Yes.
Grandma Mary was at the abortion clinic, which was a very nice place. It was Dr. Sunshine at Gramercy Park, where all the ladies went to get taken care of. And she's sitting in the waiting room, and she's reunited with my father's father, Patrick. And they had a torrid one day stand at Rockaway Beach Motel. They had been separated.
It's so romantic.
Yes, very romantic. I always picture sand involved for some reason. And she's sitting in the waiting room, and she looks up at at a picture of the Virgin Mary.
Oh, she thought it was a sign.
And sees her mother's face.
Right.
In the picture, and saw it as a sign, and got up and looked at Patrick and said, I'm keeping this child, and walked out of the office.
Yeah, because I saw an online interview with your dad, and he's talking about luck.
Yeah,
and what
that was the first bit of luck right
there. What a
there.
role luck played in his career.
Yeah.
That HBO comes along just at the right time. That's the perfect vehicle for his comedy, but even his life itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Started out with a series of fortunate
But I was also thinking, reading that story, was that that's the kind of story your father would have heard and thought, oh, what a piece of shit. Like she saw the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful irony of it.
Yes.
Here's a man who dismantled the 10 Commandments, and yet the Virgin Mary saved his life.
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
Ironic.
It's so beautiful.
So tell us, and Gilbert and I were talking about a million things, and we've got so many cards here and so many things we could cover. We're talking about Jack Burns before you came in and so many different parts of your dad's career. But it's safe to say, and we both read the book, it's safe to say you did not have a conventional childhood.
Safe to say.
Yeah. Tell us about, I mean, you could start, tell us about the first time your mom sat you down in front of the TV to see
Yes.
Dad.
Mom was so excited because, Dad had been doing a little bit of TV here and there. And so I was born in 63. So by about 65, Dad was getting rolling. And I think he did the Tonight Show at that point with Carson. He'd already done it very early on with Parr, with Burns. But there was a Tonight Show, and there was, some Merv Griffins and things like that were happening. Whatever it was, I don't know what the show was, but my mother was very excited. I was old enough to understand Daddy's out doing work or whatever. Live TV, of course. And she plops me down in front of the TV, and the announcer says, "And here's George Carlin." And this little 4-inch man comes up on this screen, and it's my dad's voice coming at me. And I freak out. I am convinced he is stuck inside the little box.
I love that.
And I go running. Where's my daddy? My daddy! Didn't go over well. No.
See, that sounds like you were on acid as a kid.
Aren't all kids on acid?
Yeah.
And gradually you got used to the idea that he was...
I did.
yes, yeah.
Gradually I did. I absolutely understood. Yes.
But it's to capture some of what the book, I mean, most of what the book is about. It's a very, safe to say, use the word tumultuous
Yes.
childhood.
Yeah, I mean
it's a little like you growing up in days of wine and roses.
Yeah, a little bit. And yet if, all of us out there who have, alcoholic or addict parents or any kind of a dysfunctional childhood, that would be 99% of us, but it was the times too. The cultural shift really did shape what was going on in my family. And, here my dad was a kid who had smoked pot since he was 14 on the streets of New York, straight-laced comic, getting all the success, doesn't feel true to himself. On the inside, he's hanging out with all of his rock and roll friends. They're all getting to speak the truth on stage. My dad realizes he's entertaining the parents of the people he wants to be hanging out with. And he finally finds his true voice, and that's 70, 71. And then, it's the early 70s, and the drugs were insane. And that's how everyone shared their love back then. Here's a packet of this, here's that, here's a joint. And my dad comes from a solid Irish upbringing. His dad was a raging alcoholic. So there were some years there about age 7 to 12, especially between my mother's very serious alcoholism that almost killed her and my dad's cocaine addiction. There was some fucked up shit in my household going on, But the thing about it is, and the thing I really wanted to talk about in this book and really portray, is that no matter what, we loved each other, and we knew that, and that got us through, and that ultimately saved the day. So even though there was a lot of chaos, there was a foundation of real love.
The Three Musketeers.
The Three Musketeers that my dad called us.
It's
yeah.
touching.
One of the people, not surprisingly, who discovered your father was Lenny Bruce.
Yes, Lenny got my dad his first manager, Murray Becker, who managed all those guys. And Lenny saw my dad and told Murray Becker about him, and Lenny would tell club owners, you should hire this guy. And Lenny was, a god to my father.
Yeah, he was the original of getting in trouble.
Well, yeah, and I tell the story in my solo show about how, and I think I tell it in the book too, about how in 1961 when Lenny was arrested in Chicago, both my parents were there. They were just married, And the cops were trying to hassle the club owner about underage drinking. So they were asking for everyone's ID, and they asked my dad for his ID. And my dad, in his typical wanting to cooperate with the police, say, "I don't believe in identification." And they promptly threw him in the back of the paddy wagon with Lenny. When my dad proudly told Lenny what he had just done, Lenny looked at him and said, "What are you, a schmuck?" And my mom chased that paddy wagon by foot all the way to the precinct and bailed him out of jail that night. So my mom and dad and Lenny had a fun relationship.
Yeah, people talk about them a lot in the same thought.
Yep. Well, and it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, without Lenny Bruce, there is no George Carlin. So
did they? I guess they knew Lenny toward the end.
yeah, in fact, my dad visited him the day before he died.
Ooh.
Yeah, and they were shocked by all of that too, and really pissed off about what the cops did and all that stuff. So
Yeah, because for anyone who doesn't know, he was getting in trouble for obscenity.
Yes.
I guess in the 50s.
and religion and talking about the
And-
church
yes,
too.
that's right.
I mean, that's a big part of it was that.
And he was actually getting arrested for it.
Yeah, he would just wear his trench coat on stage because he knew he didn't want to lose his coat. So he would wear his trench coat on stage, knowing that they were going to arrest him on stage, and that they would just take him away and they wouldn't let him get his own stuff. So yeah.
Another piece of lucky timing for your dad in a way, because he came along just a little bit after.
Yep.
And things had relaxed a tick.
A tick.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where he wasn't going to be thrown in jail
Right.
for talking about religion.
Except
and things
for in Milwaukee.
Except for in Milwaukee. Right, of course.
Now here's a point in your book that hit me. And I remember as a kid listening, I used to listen to the radio a lot, and there was, I think, BAI at that point was like a kind of hippie kind of
Pacifica
station.
Network.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very hippie.
And I remember hearing a song, maybe I heard it once, and it stuck in my head. And I thought, am I the only one familiar with this song? Until I was reading your book. And the song, pardon me if my Native American's a little rusty, Wichita, ta, gimme ra, oranika, hey, nay,
Gilbert.
hey, nay, ora. All that spring spirit going round my head
Yes.
makes me feel glad that I'm not dead. Wichita, ta, gimme ra, oranika, oranichi, hey, ora, no, hey.
Yes. I sing it in my solo show.
You do?
Yeah, I do a whole scene around it.
Unbelievable.
Oh, Gilbert, that's so funny.
Unbelievable.
That's so Pacifica.
Yes,
You're a regular Buffy St. Marie. Gil.
I heard that.
Oh my God. Provenza is going to shit that you just sang that to me.
You were listening to BAI in those days?
Yeah, I was listening to everything.
Incredible.
Why not?
Yeah, I
Incredible.
had no life. When
Oh
I
my-
wasn't watching TV, I was listening to the radio.
Listening to Native
What?
American songs.
Boy, and then I saw it in the book, and I just saw one word. I said, I know that song.
You know he sings on every song, on
Yes.
every show.
I did
Kelly,
not
so this
know
is-
that.
I got my chance
He got
to
his-
sing
Thank
here.
God. Yes, I gave you that opportunity. Wow.
If we can only find a way to put in some Paul Williams numbers, I can do my Paul Williams.
Oh my God. I'm blown away right
Yeah.
now. I was not expecting that out of your mouth.
Because you said you were at camp,
Yeah.
and they
Right.
used to sing it.
Yeah, they sang it to me. Yeah. Oh my God.
There's some other stuff in there. I don't want to talk too much about the substance abuse, but it's in your show. It's in the book.
Well, and it's part of what built the foundation
Yeah.
of. I mean, the book is really about the father-daughter relationship mostly, but it's about the whole family, and then it's about me finding my way
Sure.
towards myself. So I mean, it's part of my story. Absolutely.
I didn't want to go too Oprah on you.
It's okay.
But you should at least tell Gilbert the son the
Okay.
son
All right.
story
So-
because it's such a wonderful story.
So we're first of all, we've been in Hawaii on a Hawaiian vacation that did not go well. My parents were brandishing knives at each other. They were trying to kill each other. I end up having to get them to sign I write out what I call a UN-style peace treaty to get them to calm down during the vacation. So the vacation has been rather not vacation-y. The very next day we come home from vacation, my dad walks into my room, wakes me up and says, Kelly, I have something important to tell you. I was convinced we're getting divorced. I mean, it has to be because they've been trying to kill each other for the last year. Instead, my father says to me, Kelly, I think the sun has exploded and we have about 7 minutes to live.
Wow.
And, it's your dad, I mean, I knew he'd been doing a lot of drugs. He'd probably been up for 4 days. But when your dad's your dad, you think, well, maybe we should go and check. And so we did. We went outside and checked. And I have to tell you, when we got outside, the sun, it was one of those L.A. smoggy, this is the 70s when L.A. was really smoggy. It was one of those L.A. smoggy days. And the sun was really bright and it was kind of weird out. And I thought, wow, maybe really this is happening. And so my dad's like, you know what? We should really find out if anyone else notices that. And he was like ready to call his friend Doc in New York here from the old neighborhood. But then he says, you know what? The phenomena of the sun exploding might be different on the East Coast. So we need someone on this coast. And so he calls his friend Joe Billardino in Sacramento and has to explain to Joe over the phone that could you go outside and check and see if the sun is okay because I think it may have exploded. And being a 10-year-old kid sitting on the end of a bed listening to your dad having this conversation with a friend, you're thinking, really, this if the sun hasn't exploded, it doesn't matter because, my life is over as I knew it. Oh, my God.
Was this a bad acid trip?
It was I think he really had been up for about 3 or 4 days on cocaine.
Right, and when he would stay up 3 or 4 days at a time I mean, at one point you found him, he would stay up organizing his albums.
Organizing everything. You name it, he would organize
the story
it.
of you finding him, and I guess he's been up 3 or 4 days at this point, and he's organizing washers.
Yes, washers, screws, nails,
putting them in
sizes, usage. I mean, whatever. Had little drawers, this little thing with little drawers. Oh, yeah. He was slightly OCD, so any kind of organizing was just, was his bliss. So, and when you're doing coke, things get tidy.
Right.
And I found out, I didn't know this, that your father was in a comedy team.
Yeah, Burns and Carlin, Jack Burns, who ended up replacing
well, he replaced Don Knotts.
Don Knotts
briefly on Andy Griffith's show.
Yeah, and Burns and
Schreiber.
Yeah, and Burns and Schreiber.
Yeah, I remember. Well, Burns and Schreiber were afterwards.
Yes, they were. They were in the late 70s.
Yeah, because they were very popular.
Yeah,
when
Jack Burns is a genius.
And still with us.
And I can't get him to leave his house to let the world know that he's a genius.
We'd love to have him on.
I know. He's in L.A. He won't do anything. He won't do my podcast. He won't come out for anything.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
And he is a fucking genius. He killed at my dad's memorial. I'm like, Jack, you need to be out in the world doing this more often. You just killed up there.
Yeah, I remember it's like in that, well, with him and Schreiber, it used to be like, cab, taxi, cab, it's a taxi cab,
Didn't they do that kind of what? What?
Yeah. What?
Oh, sure.
They used to do that quick, back and forth.
Avery, people would know, maybe audiences would know Avery Schreiber because I think he became the Doritos guy.
Yeah,
later.
I think you're right,
he had a
he
series
did.
of Doritos
That's right.
commercials where he would bite
big,
the
bushy-haired guy.
Yeah, he would bite the chip. But Jack Burns, and again to our listeners, look him up because he had a great career.
And look up the early Burns and Carlin stuff. It's out there on,
kind of Irish New England.
Very
accent.
Irish. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they met in, if I have my stories right, they met in a radio station in Boston.
I believe so, yeah, because my dad had stolen the radio truck to go score weed in New York City, and they both got fired or something. I don't know. It's crazy.
Now, was it Jack Burns who produced
Fridays?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he had the famous Andy Kaufman incident.
Oh, yes.
With the fake kind of.
Yeah.
Jack Burns, look him up.
Yeah, please.
And tell Gilbert, and I don't want to dwell on the. It's just.
But you keep dwelling on it.
Well,
What is that? He apologizes and then he does
because it's so riveting.
It's kind of like saying to someone, "Hey, I never do this." Yeah.
I'm just fascinated by it.
Cute.
You're 12 and you're having. Thank you for saying that. You're 12 and you're having a conversation with Sammy Davis Jr.
Oh, yes.
This is sort of another inappropriate.
So, Mom gets sober. Yay.
Yeah.
She doesn't die. Because she almost fucking died. She gets sober. So we go to Hawaii for Christmas, and we stay at the Kahala Hilton, very fancy Hollywood place back in the 70s. And when we arrive, we realize that Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet are doing the New Year's Eve show, and Sammy Davis is part of it too. And of course, Dad knows all of them from Vegas and all those places. So now, we get to sit and have dinner with Steve and Edie and Sammy. We have dinner, and then they do the show and everything like that. And it's, it's like, it's schmaltzy, but it's great at the same time.
Yeah.
So at the end of the show, we're at some kind of party, whatever, and Dad's talking to Sammy, and I'm standing there with Dad, between Sammy and Dad, and they're talking about Coke and how what a horrible drug it is, and how my mom was sober now, and Dad's walking away from it, and Sammy's like, yeah, man, it really took me over too, and everything like that. And there I was, it was 75, so I was about 12, and I'm standing there, and as if it was perfectly normal to have a 12-year-old part of this conversation. But I felt like it because even though I had never snorted cocaine, it was like I really understood the insanity of the drug because I just watched my parents almost kill each other with it for 4 years,
Does it occur to your dad or Sammy Davis Jr. at any point to say, maybe we should walk away from the 12-year-old?
No, darling.
Maybe we should get her an ice
No,
cream.
it's 1975. We didn't, there was no boundaries in 1975.
Yeah, and of course later, and this is the last I'll say about it, but I'm leading to a place that I know Gilbert will care about. Later, you developed your own.
I developed my own liking of that particular drug, and because I I experimented and had fun in high school. Of course, I went to a very cool, hip high school in Santa Monica called Crossroads, where this was at the time where you could get a note from your parents because to smoke cigarettes. It was back in those days, and so yeah, I experimented in high school, and then I met an older man. I was 18, he was 29, and he was very much into the cocaine, and I fell into a large baggie of it for a few years myself. So
I think it'd be disappointing in a way if the daughter of George Carlin
did do a little of that.
It turned out to be
right?
Marcia Brady.
Yeah, that would exactly.
And during one of these lost moments of your life, you wind up, and I have no fear about bringing this up because it's in the book. You wind up falling into bed with a teen idol.
Oh yeah, that was in high school. So I went to Crossroads. There was a lot of famous people's kids who went there and still do. And we all, hung out with all sorts of Beverly Hills High and all those stuff. And we had all the money in the world, access to everything, and zero responsibility. Our parents just gave us cars and money, and I shared weed with my dad. I mean, it was insane times. So we end up... I end up in a bad relationship with a boy who is not nice to me and is kind of emotionally and physically abusive to me, and not kind of, he was.
This is the guy that you'd rather chase with a baseball bat.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And so one day I'm hanging out with myself, and I'm hanging out with Griffin O'Neill, Ryan's son, Tatum's brother. Trouble right there. And I love Griffin to this day, and Griffin's all clean and sober and great now, but we were all troublemakers back then. And Leif Garrett. I ended up hanging out with Leif Garrett one day, and my ex-boyfriend shows up, and it's one of those abusive domestic violence things where you're like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, with the crazy person. And so I make this decision that I'm going to bed Leif Garrett that night. Because
sorry to lead you there, but it's so good, so juicy.
By betting Leif Garrett, I will somehow heal myself of all of the pain of this abusive relationship and kind of...
So you weren't thinking straight.
No, it was an act of great feminism, Gilbert. I was going to put a notch in my bedpost and empower myself. And so we go out to Malibu to Ryan and Farah's house because that's what you do.
Oh, yeah.
And we walk in, and I see the wall of Farrah Fawcett there, and there's all these pictures of Farrah, and I'm thinking this is a sign of even more feminine empowerment. Look how empowered she is. I'm empowered too. And so Leif and I, of course, end up doing the deed on the couch, and we were 17 and very high, and it wasn't the most fantastic sexual experience of my life. Not that I'd had a lot to compare it to. So then the next day, we wake up and we sneak upstairs into Ryan and Farrah's bed. And I want to say, Leif redeemed himself. And then I'm laying there on the bed thinking, okay, how fucking surreal is this? I'm in Ryan O'Neal and Farrah Fawcett's bed, having sex with Leif Garrett. Like, it doesn't get more surreal than that. And I'm George Carlin's daughter. Like, the whole package is there. And I'm thinking, this is the most surreal moment I will ever have in my life. And then 10 minutes later, we go into the bathroom to take a shower together. And I say to Leif, hand me the shampoo. And so he hands me Farrah Fawcett's shampoo, but it is actually Farrah Fawcett brand shampoo.
Love it.
And so I always end the story with, so there I was washing my hair with Farrah Fawcett brand shampoo under Farrah's faucet.
That's such a great L.A. growing up a kid in L.A. story.
It really is the perfect
celebrity
story.
kid.
It is.
Yeah.
You just can't help yourself.
And what was the story of your father chasing the guy with the baseball bat?
Well, I finally told my parents what was going on, and my dad looked at me like, why the fuck didn't you tell me this before? And the boy showed up a few days later, and my dad went into his office and just kind of, put the baseball bat on his shoulder to kind of let him know. And he just told him, you come near my daughter again, I'll bash your fucking head in. And for me, it was, a profound moment, because it was this like my dad showed up, like the dad.
It's
part.
parenting.
It was
Yeah,
parenting. Yeah. Like he finally fathered me, and it was a really actually a sweet moment in my life.
I was thinking of a Leif Garrett song, by the way, when you were telling that.
Oh, I didn't. I put it.
I was made for dancing.
I was made for dancing all night long.
Bless your heart.
And that's when I realized he wasn't.
And Gilbert, you slept with Jack Wilde, right? And
Yes.
so you have your own teen idol. You could relate to that.
Now, your father was also court-martialed.
Yeah, a few times, I
Yes.
believe. I think if you look in his memoir, actually, Gilbert,
Yes.
next time you're in LA, call me up. You're coming over to my house, and I'm going to show you the archives, because I have my dad's Air Force folder, and then my dad wrote out on a list on a specific piece of paper where he started rank-wise, when he was promoted, and when he was demoted. And it's like this little roller coaster ride of George Carlin's military career. Yeah, he was,
Not big on authority.
No.
Famously.
Thank God.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about, I just want to talk about, too, since we brought up Burns and Carlin, I mean, that before we move to the transformation, the big transformation, I mean, he had a busy career when he was the straight George Carlin.
Sure.
When he was button-down George Carlin.
Oh,
I mean, it was not only Burns and Carlin, but he was hosting...
But he went
Parr
solo.
and
He
Carson.
went solo pretty quickly after Burns and Carlin,
Right.
and then he did a ton. He did a ton of stuff. He did a ton of TV, and he became the it guy. He was the modern hip comic, and he had a ton of success.
He was on That Girl.
He was on That Girl. He played
Cast by our friend Bill Persky.
Yes.
who did this show.
Yeah.
Shout out to Bill.
Yeah,
And your father, and early on in his career, had the Danny Kaye plan.
He did. He really seriously, at age
We've
9
discussed
or
Danny
10.
Kaye.
Yeah. If you listen to the show,
times.
Danny Kaye comes up a lot.
Yes.
In the context you can imagine.
So dad sat in the movies as a little kid and saw what he could do with language.
Oh, yeah.
And all of that, and the funny voices and the thing. And dad said, I want to be just like him. And he came up with this career strategy at age 9. Become a DJ, get good at that, then become a stand-up, and then they'll let me be in the movies like Danny Kaye. And it is exactly what he did. He became a DJ, and then he became a stand-up, and then he did some acting and hated it, and luckily became a better stand-up.
Yeah.
But then years later, he kind of met Danny Kaye.
He did, and so it wasn't even years later.
Yeah.
When he was a little boy, he waited out. They'd take the subway down to Times Square and all the Broadway shows, and he was outside of some theater waiting for Danny Kaye in the rain for hours to get an autograph. And Danny Kaye came out and blew right past all of them. And my dad swore to himself that if I ever become famous, I will never, ever do that. And my dad let anyone come in, especially young kids. If the kid came up with an album anywhere at any time, my dad stopped what he was doing and would talk to the kid, have a conversation, and sign whatever needed to be signed.
And I think he said that, I think your father was watching like Danny Kaye do these commercials for like UNICEF.
I knew what a prick he was.
Yeah.
Some sort of ambassador to children.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
Please.
He was also famously good not only to fans but to comics, but to young comics. And Gary Shandling told a story about George, your dad, giving him some feedback on some comedy material. I think Lewis Black was somebody else.
Lewis is someone else
that
too.
he encouraged.
Yeah, a lot of comics. Yeah.
And when I met him, he was great to me. By the way, I met him at a signing at the Writers Guild for Napalm and Silly Putty.
And I found out after he died that not only, I mean, I'd heard the Gary Shandling story because Gary had told it publicly, but I had young comics, open mic comics, who were still open mic comics, contacting me and saying, so I was writing for the college paper. I interviewed your dad. I told him I was a stand-up. Your dad would check in with me every few months to see how my open mics were going.
Wow.
Yeah. See, Gilbert, you should have fucking called him.
You should have called him. Think of how much help he would have been. So all of this stuff is going on. He's doing, I was telling Gilbert before, this variety show called Away We Go with Buddy Rich and Buddy Greco, and he's on That Girl.
There was
and
some
he's
good weed on that shoot.
Kraft Summer Music Hall and the Hollywood Palace and all the shows
all
of the
them,
day.
yeah.
And Joey Bishop and the Smothers Brothers. And then he decides, and the drugs are a
And then he
catalyst
drops
for this.
acid.
Well, you have that great line in the book where you say America was falling in love with
America
George.
had fallen in love with George Carlin just in time for him to have fallen out of love with them.
It's great.
Yeah.
He tells the story.
Yeah.
And so the obviously the pot and the cocaine or maybe it's not cocaine at that point.
No cocaine at that
acid.
time. No, the acid really, he says pot and acid, any kind of psychedelic is a values shifter. And he realized at that point, what the hell am I doing? I am entertaining the parents of the people I'm hanging out with. My dad was in between the two generations. He was over 30 when he made the change and the shift. And yet he related to all these 20-somethings going through all that stuff. And he went to my mother. Well, he got fired twice from Vegas. And he went to my mother and he said, I can't do this anymore. And my mother had just put a deposit down on a beautiful home in the San Fernando Valley. And, but she saw the pain he was in and she said, okay, let's go for it. And they did. And
well, didn't he say, I'd be happy if I just play coffee houses and colleges for the rest of my career?
Yeah.
So the transformation, and you say in the book he went in for hernia surgery. Yeah,
came out. I had grew his didn't shave while he was in the hospital, and he came home with a beginning of a beard, and it kind of scared me. When you're a kid and your dad looks different suddenly, because it was 70, I was only 6 or 7, and he never shaved the beard from that day forward, and then started growing his hair. He'd already had those sideburns. He was kind of already faking the long hair with the sideburns,
Right.
and the little bit of length in the back, but it was still short hair. It's pretty cute.
And I love that he's this line in the book. If Caesar, when he was still doing the straight lace comedy, and he was still button down George, and Gilbert will appreciate this. He says, if Cesar Romero dances past me one more time in one of these clubs, because he hated playing. At that point, the Copa.
Oh.
And he got himself fired at the Copa.
Yeah.
Jules Podell banging the ring.
Yeah. Oh, God.
And the whole thing.
Lying on the stage and
reading
underneath the piano just to get fired. And the Playboy Club would not fire him no matter what.
And doesn't he drive to Chicago to meet Hef? Because he figures Hef is a...
Hef understands. And Hef says there's two there's two Hugh Hefners. There's the Playboy and there's the businessman. Sorry. You're fired. Hef still owes us $1,200. By the way.
Really?
Never paid my dad for that, and it's supposed to in the contract. Anyway.
Interesting. So much for the Danny Kaye plan.
Thank God he was good at stand-up.
And then AM and FM, which is which he comes out with the album, which is the
which
old
was
George.
Brilliant because it was like, here's the old George. You all know him. You remember him. This is the one side, and here's the other side. Here's the new George. I mean, what a beautiful, smart way to transition.
Yeah, he ushered everybody through.
Yeah, he held their hand through it.
And can you read the portion from your book? Your book is, of course, a Carlin home companion growing up with George.
Wait a minute, I got it marked.
All right.
Is this the part about you?
Is this the you part?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. Excellent.
hold on. We'll
Of course
cut.
I can.
We'll cut because I lost my spot.
All right. It's in the ashes.
Hang on, Gil. Here it is.
All right, here it
Okay.
is. All right. So just to give you a little context, my dad gave me 30 days to get rid of his ashes. And, of course, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to go to New York and spread them all over town. So here's the bit. So Bob and I arrived at JFK late in the day on July 18th. After we checked into the hotel, we immediately headed downtown to the Club Comics to see Richard Belzer. Belzer was making a rare appearance that night and had arranged for us to see the show. As I sat there, and by the way, I didn't know any comedians until my dad died. Just want to make that context. Belzer called me and said, "Welcome to the family. You're coming to New York. I'm going to take care of you." So that's how that happened. So as I sat there watching Belzer on stage, I was hit hard with the realization that I would never see my dad on a stage again. While everyone in the club was laughing, I was crying. After the show, we headed toward the dressing room. Before I could open the backstage door, Taylor Negron came walking out. Taylor and I had met at a spoken word gig in Los Angeles the year before. I was very fond of him. He's a great human and a fantastic writer-performer. We hugged. I knew I was home, safe and sound, with family. And that feeling grew as I made my way into the dressing room. Belzer was so lovely and kind. Then Gilbert Gottfried came out of the bathroom. I was a huge fan, but he also made me nervous. I can't explain it, really. It feels like he's from another planet. And so I'm never sure what he's going to do or say. Richard introduced us, and Gilbert asked, "What are you doing in New York?" "I'm here to spread my ashes," I said. And Gilbert said, "Do you have any on you now?" Now, I had put a small Ziploc bag of ashes in my purse before I left the hotel room, knowing we'd be near Greenwich Village that night, and maybe there'd be a chance to spread them at the bitter end. But I lied to Gilbert and said no. I lied because I really didn't know what he would do if I had said yes. I feared he might eat them. Gilbert then asked me, "Whose career is more dead, mine or George's?" Without a beat, my friend Amy said, "Yours, Gilbert." Everyone laughed, and I realized, yes, these were my people.
That's touching. I love it.
That's of course in your new book, A Carlin Home Companion.
Yes.
Yep. I just want to talk too real quick about the second change for your dad because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
There's so much to cover.
I know.
There's so much. First of all, there's so much to cover in the book, and
But people get to read that.
yes, but and hopefully you're going to bring your show to New York.
I
And we'll get
would
and
love
we'll
to.
get
It would
see
be fantastic.
But his career is so long.
It's amazing.
And so varied.
It's-
and then if the specials themselves, you could do an hour.
Absolutely.
And a half just on the content there.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about the big change from button-down George to more radicalized George,
Yes.
then there's a change even later, which Gilbert and I were talking about, where if you look at Carlin and Carnegie and Carlin on Campus and the early HBO specials, it's kind of the hippie George and
Yeah,
playing
and the
with words.
very observational.
But then comes the turn. I guess it's Jamming in New York.
I would say so. Even the show before that in '90, you start to see it. He starts to talk about politics in the
Right.
one, which I think is What Am I Doing in New Jersey?
Right.
But yeah, because in the '80s, he kind of. When he talked about that part of his career, he said, given the chance to bend back around toward the middle, I took it. And he had a big tax debt. And
that's when he was returning to appearing on the old variety shows like Tony Orlando.
But then he saw Sam Kinison and saw Sam screaming at the audience. And he realized, we've lost the audience and we have to wake them up. We have to get their attention. And look at what Sam's doing. And he was very intrigued by Sam. And my dad, I didn't really realize this till later, but my dad would see something like that, and maybe Gilbert, you feel this way too. It's like, now I have to raise the bar. Like now, uh-oh, my game has to get better too. And that's what happened to him. He knew his game had to get better, and he started going in this direction where he could really, really let his rage feed his comedy.
And wasn't there a point that your father just kind of like became just part of the norm?
Yeah, that was the 80s. I mean, definitely. He kind of, he was trying to pay the bills and everything, and he wanted to. I mean, he had to pay the bills,
Yeah.
and so he ended up doing, like Tony Orlando and Dawn Christmas specials,
alluding to that
and shit
before.
like that.
Well, that's the point that he sees Rick Moranis parodying him
Yes.
on SCTV,
Yes.
which must have been painful.
Devastating to
Right.
him.
To
Devastating.
realizing
to be,
now I'm a-
now I'm being made fun of.
Or at the very least, I'm old guard.
And then, so we're getting the rights to that for my solo show because I played on my solo show, the Rick Moranis thing. So we have to find Rick Moranis. He has the rights to all that stuff. Rick calls me up to say, I can't believe I hurt your dad's feelings. I never meant to do that. We were just joking in the room and I wanted to do him. And he had no idea what a devastating effect it
Wow.
had. And so Rick called and talked to me for like 45 minutes about the whole thing. It was just, Rick's a very sweet man.
Yeah, we're pretty much retired from the business at this
I
point,
believe
by the
so,
way.
yeah.
So in Jammin' in New York and the one before it, in What Am I Doing in New Jersey, I mean, the full social critic, the social and political critic
Shows up.
emerges,
Yeah.
and it's a different George Carlin.
For sure. And the Jammin' Show was my dad's favorite show, and I believe it is probably one of the most perfectly crafted bits of hour of comedy.
Well,
ever.
it's got the stuff that you're used to, and the airline stuff, and
Yeah.
and the languages, and did you ever do the moving train
Yep.
bit and all the
Yeah.
observational stuff? But it opens up with an attack on Bush.
Yeah. And Reagan's gang, I think,
Yeah,
was the name
Reagan's
of the bit.
gang, yeah.
And all of the criminals that were in Reagan's cabinet, and how none of these people are in jail, or a lot of them did get indicted. And yeah, he went right for it. And the Gulf. I mean, this is Gulf War, territory, and all of that. So yeah, it was thrilling to watch. It was a thrilling moment for me to watch because nobody was doing anything like that, and he was stepping over that line we talked about earlier, and yet doing it with his normal deftness, his poetry. But now there was, we had all survived the 80s somehow, and he was speaking that rage that we had all been keeping in for 10 years, and he was just letting it go. It was beautiful.
It's funny that you asked Gilbert that before. Did you ever, the Kinnison analogy, did you ever find in your journey or in all the years you've been doing stand-up that the audience, you had to turn the act a little more extreme to get people to keep people's attention?
Yeah, I notice that each time I go on stage.
I knew from his expression where he was going with that. I mean, when you started, you were doing impressions.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
act became more and more outrageous.
Oh, yeah.
Was that to satisfy you or to keep people's...
Yeah, I have no idea. I've never like I told you about that line. It's the duty of the comedian.
Mm-hmm.
I always said what appealed to me about that is he said duty. So I was never that intellectual.
Oh man!
And the later specials, and we were talking about this before you came in, he found it interesting, and I did too, in the book that you talk about, I think it's Life is Worth Losing, where you thought even he had started to cross the line into a little bit.
I was worried about him. I was worried about his heart and his soul. I was physically worried about his heart and all that anger, which is really not good for heart patients. And I was worried, has he really given up on all of us? Has he really given up on the species? Because guess what, Dad? I'm 40-something, and I get to be on this planet, hopefully for another 20 to 40 years. So could you root for us a little bit? Could you root for me? And I felt a little left out. I never voiced that to my dad because when you read the book, you'll find out we didn't do a lot of talking in our family about things like that or anything. But yeah, I was worried. I was worried about him. And, at one point I confronted him and I did say, Dad, if you've really given up on everything, then why do you bother going out on a stage and talking about this stuff? And he really took that to heart and really thought about it, and eventually said, you're right. I'm a broken-hearted idealist. And if you scratch the surface of a cynic, you will find a broken-hearted idealist. And he did in 1972. When McGovern lost, he knew it was all over. He never voted after that. And he just kind of checked out. And then that just increased over the decades with all the insanity going on in this planet. So, and, that position he had about being able to be outside of the species and the planet and look back, that gave him a lot of artistic freedom. And I understand that. It's important to have that. And personally, he didn't give up on anybody or anyone. Individuals he loved, but he knew kind of this is a very interesting biological experiment we've got going here as human beings. So
he didn't like groups. That was for
and
sure,
definitely
right?
didn't like groups.
Right.
Yeah, he said in some interview that everybody's, if you meet them by themselves, they have a certain decency about them.
Yeah.
But if they go with one other person,
Just one. It's all it needs.
But he didn't mind audience.
3. We're fucked.
yeah.
There's an interview online, which of course you've seen, with Sonny Fox and the radio Sonny Fox, not the old Wonderama host Sonny Fox,
Yes.
where he's talking about that very thing. And he asked him, "Do you really give up? Did you really give up?" And he said that it was disappointment in
is.
what happened to the species.
It is
that
disappointment.
We went in the wrong direction.
We did. And yeah.
But how many artists get to have that many acts in their life that he went from? Look at the.
It's a great point, and I think it is what makes his story so rich, his particular story, and I think it's inspiring for any kind of person who's an artist or person in the performing arts or whatever, because you can evolve, you can reinvent, and you should, because look at how rich it was for him. At each time he evolved, he went deeper, and his audiences got bigger. So.
Always different.
Always different.
And prolific. I mean, nobody.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody.
The man
turned
was
out
writing all the time.
more material. And
Consummate craftsman.
yeah. I just had one last question. Does it bother you when so many things on the internet are attributed
Yes.
to George Carlin?
It drives
that are-
me fucking crazy.
It's everywhere.
And
what can you do about
and
it?
I can't. At first, I wanted to correct every single one of them, and then I realized I will never win this battle. So what I do now is, if I find a really egregious one, like earlier this year, one of the neocon. Big neocon groups like the Heritage something or others took one of my dad's quotes, which is about how business, the owners of this country, and I don't know the whole quote, but if you guys go find the owners of the country, George Carlin, he's got a whole bit about big business, and they changed the word business to government. And they put it up as a poster meme on Facebook.
I heard
it
about this.
completely changes the whole fucking
It's the
meaning
bit about
of the
the
quote.
owners of America don't want
Yes.
an informed society. That's why
Yes.
education sucks.
Yes. Oh,
Right.
no, it's not even about the
not that
education
bit?
one. It's like it's the one about business or so. Anyway, the business owners or yes. So anyway, so what I do now is when I see something like that, is I sick the fans on those people. And I go onto social media and I have this army because they are rabid, loyal fans of my dad's, and they've become fans of mine, and I'm just so touched by how much they want to protect me and all of that. And I sick these legions of George Carlin fans on these neocons and these Christians and all this stuff. And it's very fun to watch then. It's a big show.
Last question. You got a last question?
Oh. Yeah.
It's going to be about him.
I'm so afraid now.
Do you like to suck cock?
Not as much as I used to.
Well, like if it was a comedian.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah. What if he was a voice in a Disney car?
Still a fan? She's thinking about it.
What character?
Only a lead.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Only a lead.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, wait, no. Well, that might work out.
Yeah. Okay.
Here's an impossible question to answer before we go. Favorite, you can't pick it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Favorite routine? Can you boil it down to
I love
one?
the little goofy shit.
Me too.
He would do. So, you know, the dogs and cats bit. There's just moments in that. But also when he, like the last, I don't know how many HBO shows, when he would come out and do the declaration line. He would come out, and the first one was, the people. Why is it that the people who are against abortion, the people who want to fuck anyway?
Right.
That like these big declaration lines.
Right.
Loved that too, but really loved the goofy shit. Okay, favorite bit: segmented walking farts.
That's a great one. That's a great one.
Because you gotta love a fart joke.
He did. He made them into an art form.
He did.
I love what is it? The National Pancake. This message
Oh,
from the
fuck
National
waffles.
Fuck
Yeah.
waffles.
Fucking A, man.
Yeah,
One of my favorite things.
I love the Bad Hair Day.
Yeah.
Bit. I think that's on Carlin and Carnegie.
Yeah,
and for larger bits, more satirical bits or more pointed bits. You referenced it before. The 2 Commandments.
Yeah.
Taking the 10 Commandments and he boils it.
It's brilliant.
It's real artistry.
And then there's Modern Man.
Modern Man is
which
great
is,
too.
It's just incredible.
And I loved his line where he said, God is the leading cause of death.
Oh, and I could only get away with this on your podcast.
Go for it.
The shooting in the church?
Yes.
My dad had a bit about it. He kept saying, I can't wait until there's guns in churches and they start shooting those motherfuckers. Now, of course, he would have not have been happy that it was a white racist in a black church. But the minute that news story came up, I thought, Dad, you fucking got what you wanted. And it breaks my heart. And yet I thought he always predicted this shit.
He predicted a lot of things.
He always predicted this shit. He was so prophetic. So it's the most distasteful thing I've said in a while. But I thought of my dad when that news story came up.
Well, you could get away with that on this show.
Of course
this
I could.
Show,
because,
this show
because
is all
Gilbert,
in bad taste.
Because Gilbert just asked me to suck his fucking dick. So.
It's becoming a pattern on this show.
What made you give up sucking cock?
Nothing.
No?
But when you're in your 50s, you're like, Jesus, I've had enough of this.
Right. Goddamn Pfizer.
I'm sure men going down on their wives gets a little old at 50.
Well, we have nothing to say to that. I'm a newlywed.
So glad I made Gilbert laugh.
You did. I'm going to plug the book.
Thank you.
Want to plug you plug the book.
either
You're
way.
the host.
Oh, okay. The book is called
A Carlin Home.
Well, see, that's the second part of the book. I don't read this shit. A Carlin Home Companion. Growing Up with George. And our guest today was George Carlin's pride and joy and someone who doesn't suck cock anymore.
No, I didn't say ever. I didn't say ever.
So you will be willing to suck cock.
I'm willing to suck cock.
You
of
are?
course.
So Kelly Carlin's daughter is still willing
Kelly
to
Carlin's
suck-
daughter?
Yeah, Kelly Carlin. George Carlin's daughter, Kelly Carlin, I want to announce right here and now, is still ready to suck cock.
My husband will be so happy about that news.
He's got the kilt. It's perfect.
So this has been Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast with my co-host Frank Santopadre at the Friars Club, where Kelly Carlin is willing to suck cock. Thank you, Kelly Carlin.
I was going to end on a softer note and say that it's okay to eat pancakes for dinner. And that shows the contrast of this show.
I love you both.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank
But
you.
I say it's
treat.
okay to suck cock, too.
After the pancake.
For the 5th time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly. I say this to a lot of guests, but you really were a sport.
Thank you.